While we get a little bit of AV set up, I want to start with sharing a personal note, a very personal note. 10 days ago, Monday, the day after Mother's Day, I was at my mother-in-law's bedside when she passed away. And she was 90. And I don't share that because of looking for sympathy. That's not what this is about. Many of us have taken this journey of being at the bedside of a loved one as they take their last walk. This kimono that I'm wearing was one of Ruth's. We have found out in the week since that she had a few really choice kimono. I've never seen her wear them, but I am wearing one today. And I do that because when we started to put Ruth's obituary together, you start to create a narrative arc of someone's 90 years in her case. And there's one thing I want to share with you because I think it's a beautiful touchstone for our time together today. And that is this. Ruth, at 90, right? She was born in a community called Windber, Pennsylvania. And Windber is the reverse of the Burwind family company. They were a coal mining company. Windber was a coal mining town. And Ruth adored her father. Her father was an engineer in the coal mine. And during World War II, he was a member of the civic, I think it was called the Civic Preservation Corps. And basically what this was a group of volunteer first responders who, if there was going to be bombing on US soil during World War II, Harvey was his name, he would help organize the community to protect the mine, protect people, and make sure that the community could be as safe as possible. So they would do these drills where Harvey would have to go out and by hand drop off lanterns in the middle of the night so that people could light the way and could continue to have lighting in case they were ever attacked. Ruth wanted so much to join this Civic Protection Corps. But of course, she had two disadvantages. One, she was too young at the time, and two, she was a female, right? So it was men and so forth. But what she did was she trained herself to recognize Japanese and German airplanes from the ground. So she could identify makes and models of airplanes at a very young age. Then in the 70s, she went to flight school. And then in her retirement, I have so many memories of sitting out on Ruth's deck, having a warm beer. She was very much a stoic, did not believe, she thought it was a waste of electricity to cool beer. So we would have, you have parents like this? We'd have a warm bush light, that is a bush light in the foreground there. And we would sit out on her humble back patio, and when an aircraft would go overhead, she could sometimes, just by the sound of the engine, tell you what make and model that airplane was. I share this because today we are all alive. Ruth is no longer with us, right? But we are living in a moment that was our ancestors' future. Think about this, right? The people who are no longer alive, whom you knew and loved, you are living in a moment that was their future. We were just talking at lunch about your airport, right? And Orlando just talked about the new customs office at the airport. This airport was set in motion in the 1950s. In the 1950s, decision makers were estimating that air travel would continue to be important and that DFW was going to need some alternatives. Weren't they wise? Because now we can look at the revenues, Mayor, to your point, cash flow matters, right? We can look to these revenues. So thank goodness that our ancestors had the foresight to make some of those decisions. Now, we live in a moment where we are making decisions that our successors will inherit. We are setting in motion futures that the next generation will consider their present. And because of the disruptions that we've been through, we need to choose wisely. We need to choose wisely. So what I want to do today is bring some insight, bring some foresight about where we're headed. And this is only a talk that could be delivered on this day in this place, because I think, as we all know, things are fluid. I think that is the euphemism that we use, right? Things are fluid. The economy is fluid. So here are 10 numbers. They are it's my cell phone number. And I will have a little bit of time to take a few questions before we part ways today. So if you have a question about the future, something I said, please don't hesitate to dial it up. I figure if Richard Branson can give his cell phone number to all of his employees, I can give 200 people in Addison, Texas, my cell phone number. So yeah, and please, I see some of you already doing this. Feel free to take photographs of any of these slides. You're welcome to them. So every once in a while, something happens that changes everything. And it's interesting because those changes can be the drip, drip, drip. You know, a slow incremental buildup. If you've ever had a leak in your roof, it happens for a while until you see the spot in the ceiling. And by the time you see the spot in the ceiling, you may already have some structural damage, right? So like a drip, drip, drip that we've been the beneficiary of, as an example, is women who have been entering the workforce in greater and greater numbers, right? So now we've got, you know, we're on parity with women and men in medical school and law school and so forth. And the drip, drip, drip effect of having more women in the workforce has been wonderful for our economy, right? And then there are other things that happen like a crack. A lightning strike that electrifies things and changes everything. And regardless if it's a drip drip or if it's a crack of lightning, when that something happens, it changes everything, in part because it gives us an X-ray of where exactly the damage is, where the stress fractures are, where the brokenness is. And this has certainly been the case during COVID, helping lay bare the fractures in our democracy, laying bare the fractures in our socioeconomic differences, right? Differences in public health outcomes and so forth. But I want to encourage you that as an entrepreneur myself, these kinds of X-rays are extremely valuable because they also show where the opportunity is. And if managed well, and I brought you 3 examples, if managed well, these things that change everything can actually be launch pads for the future. So let me start with an example. In 1832, there was a cholera outbreak in the United Kingdom, in England. And just to put it in some perspective, in Nottingham, England, the average life expectancy was 26 years old. As I look across this audience today, most of us are a bit north of 26, in my case, multiples north of 26, right? Can you imagine if the average life expectancy was 26? Also in Nottingham, England, in every gallon of water, this isn't polite lunchtime discussion, but I think you deserve the truth. In every gallon of water were the equivalent of 2 tablespoons of effluent. You know what that means? It means poop, right? So the water supply was absolutely horrendous. Lifespan was 26, but get this. If you died from cholera, or if someone in your family died from cholera, it was said that you or your family was of a low moral stature. People died of cholera because their morals weren't good. Well, this set in motion a super nerd. All of you know them. Maybe some of you are them, right? Edwin Chadwick, this super nerd, looked at what was happening around cholera, and it wasn't just getting better, and said, I've got to do something about this. So he and a band of other misfits started dumpster diving, started going house to house, started to create maps and kind of do census of cholera outbreaks. And 10 years later, they published a report. It was like one of the first massive public health reports. And they said cholera is not a result of moral failing on anybody's part. It's a result of germs in our water supply. And as a result of his dumpster diving and his house-to-house interviews, public health became a thing, right? So out of something terrible, something new was created. Let's come to New York City. In 1835, there was the ice storm is only part of the issue here. The actual issue is a fire. In 1835, the temperature, I know it's hard for you guys to imagine this, was negative 17 degrees. Negative 17 degrees in New York City. And the business district of New York started on fire. So as the firemen were dispatched, they had no water to put out the fire because all of the water was frozen. The business district continued to be aflame. And so the mayor said, blow up the business district. Literally detonate all of the remaining standing buildings to stop giving fuel to the fire. 7 years later, the Croton Aqueduct was christened. The Croton Aqueduct was seen as a resiliency effort for the city of New York. They said, we're never going to be without water again. We should always have a steady supply of water. So they commissioned this huge area outside the community. But there was a co-benefit effect. And that often happens after big disruptions, where one choice is made that has knock-on benefits for every other thing. And that was the Croton Aqueduct also supplied clean drinking water to people in New York. The third example. In 1871, it's reputed that the O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern, and 3 days later, because of the strong gusts in Chicago, being the Windy City, 20,000 businesses had been burned, 300 people had died, and within a few days, the Chicago Tribune, their headline, you know what their headline was? 2 words, cheer up. Cheer up. Yeah, we've just lost everything, but cheer up because we will come back. And from optimism, and I'm going to say this, a whole bunch of brilliant engineering talent, they started to experiment with new materials for buildings. Materials that weren't going to burn up. They started to look at new ways of putting steel inside of buildings, and we then had a series of architects and engineers who fought to build what we now call skyscrapers. So cholera was a root cause innovation. Cholera epidemic in the 1800s was a root cause response. The fires in New York City were a resiliency response. And then in Chicago, we've got an innovation response and an optimism response. Why do I share this? Because in every single one of those communities, it was 1, 2, maybe a few people who started the forward proactive response to what had happened in their communities. So in your companies, who are the people who will be the standard bearers for the forward-looking, this is never going to happen again on our watch, we are going to get better, let's figure it out. Because I will tell you that when humanity is pushed back, right? When humanity is pushed back, it often puts us in our best position because it gives us the pressure under which more creativity, greater innovation, and more collaboration can take place. So let me walk you through a few things. I'm going to give you a framework, and I want to give you some very specific things for you to think about as you map out your own future. The first one is this. Oftentimes I hear people say, I can't wait to get back to the way it was. But can we agree, for any physicists or engineers in here, right, you cannot go back and move forward at the same time, right? You cannot do that. Moonwalking comes close. I'm going to admit that. Moonwalking comes close. But even then, you kind of want to know what's behind you, so you don't moonwalk off the stage. So let's just make a choice for the next few minutes to talk about what's coming and how to be proactive and innovative about what's coming, because I'm very bullish about the future. First of all, again, sorry for those of you who are math nerds, or for those of you who are like, damn, how much algebra is going to be in this presentation? I swear, we're almost over. So this is a sine wave. This is a sine wave, right? And so my garden is an excellent example of this sine wave, right? So right now we're planting things and they're starting to grow. In in the north where I live, they're going to peak in September or so. We're going to just have lots and lots and lots of stuff. And then things are going to kind of die, and then they're going to go get really cold. We're going to have to plant a cover crop. Things are going to seem dead, right, throughout the winter, and then boom, come next spring, up we'll come again, above the line. There's a technique in foresight called the 3 horizons technique. It's used a lot in Europe. It's hardly used at all in the US. We, by the way, we're terrible at foresight in the US. We used to have an office of foresight. It was chaired by both Newt Gingrich and by Al Gore at different times, but we abandoned that in the 1980s. So we're now on our back leg on the regular. But here's the 3 horizons model. So horizon 1, let's start there. Horizon 1 are things that are peaking and kind of on their way down, right? They're peaking and they're kind of on their way down. It's the equivalent of, are you this person who like makes your housemate smell milk that may be sour? You're like, is this smell bad? You know, and it's like, God, it's terrible, right? So this is the idea of what's about to expire, right? We're on the crest of things that are about to expire. And then in horizon 3, these are the seeds of what's being born. The seeds of what are being born, and that is also present in this moment if you're paying attention. So here's the question to ask yourself. We can ask ourselves this at a citywide level. You can ask this yourself at a community-wide level. And I think COVID and this disruption that we're going through from the perspective of the economy and equity, let's just ask, what is becoming obsolete but trying to maintain itself? And what's the cost of that? There's a real cost in trying to keep things on life support, if you will. And there's some real grace in being a hospice care worker to those things that need to have a good death. And then in horizon 3, you ask, what's trying to emerge here? What's trying to sprout? What's trying to come forward? Easy place to look. What's happening with kids? Right? What are they interested in? What are they thinking about these days? So what are those new seeds that are starting to sprout? Signs of the future, signals of the future are all around you if you just pay attention. And I brought you some photographs that I've taken over the last couple of years. When I see a signal of the future, I like to take a picture of it. So, kind of week 1 of the pandemic. This was a car parked in my neighborhood. And I really loved the Office rendition of, The Office if COVID had happened and Dwight Schrute would be the only person who could really deal with it. What is that sound? Is somebody trying to contact us from the future? Here's my nephew, Oliver Hernandez. And be kind, even when stuff gets hard. He was supposed to be in school during the pandemic, and he was home instead. He doesn't know any different, right? My book club managed to continue to meet, even though we did it outside, often in long johns and winter months, right? Kind of pointing to that timeless nature of how we continue to want to gather. Look at this, some tagging happened on a mailbox close by. First it said, reopen Wisconsin. Somebody crossed that out and said, wear a mask. Madison is a very liberal community, so we started to see defund the police, posters going up. I loved this. Somebody took to the sidewalks. Someday this pain will be useful. And that's the very first mask I saw as litter in about April, May of 2020, right? And I thought, I wonder if this is a signal of the future. And even on the walk in here today, did you see some of this stuff, right? We've got some new art. What does art do? It helps us deal with the difficulty in life. Great music, great art, right? It's a salve for the soul. John Lewis passing away, and then here's my nephew, Oliver, again. I took him to the local fire station, which this is also timeless. It doesn't matter if it's COVID. Firemen will give a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old an amazing tour of the fire station. Thank you. I don't know how this happened, but in Madison, Wisconsin, we ran out of cheese. This was at the Madison airport. But we also managed to find ways, it was my computer that was making that terrible noise. You guys are all so polite, you didn't have the guts to tell me. But you can also now buy PPE. This is at the Minneapolis airport. Kimbra Harris, chief economist at LinkedIn on the left. Just a few weeks ago, Google announces, finally, a pixelation system where everybody can be seen. This is in the middle of Iowa. The middle of Iowa, the middle of ethanol, corn-based gas, right? Huge lobbies. But here are these Tesla soldiers standing up and ready for duty, right? Because the Department of Transportation in the state of Iowa has said we need to be a part of the EV charging superhighway. Zoom isn't satisfied with just showing up on your laptop. Now you can come in and also pick up your prescription. That's Portland, Oregon. And then this was just for fun. I managed to grow an eggplant that looked like it was dancing the cha-cha. That is from my garden. Isn't that funny? So what signals of the future are you picking up? And I'm going to just throw down a challenge. The next time you have a leadership team meeting, have this be the first question. And spend a couple minutes just asking folks, what signals of the future are you picking up? They are all around us. They are all around us. And we have to train to pick them up. Here are some of the signals I'm continuing to see. Last month again, right? We saw a record number of people quitting their jobs. You're seeing it among retirees. You're seeing it among CEOs. And what this points to me is an existential question that workers have faced, which is, what is my time worth? How am I going to spend my time? So this is toothpaste that is not going back in the tube, right? It's been too long. We've been thinking these thoughts for too many months. But it is astonishing to me that in a country that invented workaholism, we have now clearly said, what I really want is flexible flexibility, and there are things that matter more than work. Where is work being done? Now, 67% of all work cannot be done anywhere. But the rest of it, about a third, can be done anywhere. So pre-COVID and post-COVID, there's a huge change in where work can be done. And people's interest in remote work, sorry about that, that went a little bit fast. People's interest in remote work. So the number of people interested in remote work, the number of people changing jobs. My friend Dr. Grantham has done some analysis, and at the very least, as little as 14% of Class A office space will be needed. That's not the median prediction. That is like in the worst case scenario, if you will, for commercial real estate. So again, the toothpaste isn't going back in the tube. Even Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, like last year, he was like, you're back to work or you're fired. You're back to the office or you're fired. 2 weeks ago, he was like, never mind. 50% of you should be in every day. 40% of you are going to work 2 to 3 days in the office, and 10% of you can be remote all the time. Airbnb's Brian Chesky said Airbnb is going to be completely remote. 40% of all the jobs in Silicon Valley can be done remotely. 40%. So when you think about kind of this toothpaste going back in the tube, it's going to be a difficult one. I never thought I'd see this. This is from a large Midwestern state for whom manufacturing is the key driver. The Manufacturing Council, this is literally a screenshot of a text message I got from my colleague. Mental health is the top training priority in 2022. You guys, this is going to be a long tail. This is going to be a long tail. Mental health doesn't just get solved. Sometimes mental health is cyclical. So the sort of like acts of violence that we see, or the acts of aggression. Henderson, Nevada is passing out 25% more speeding tickets for people going over 100 miles an hour, right? This is not going away. As long as people are feeling isolated, they're feeling disconnected from other people, right? And they feel that they have a scapegoat or they can take it out on someone, right? They will. This is a symptom of the mental health crisis in this country. And then some power swinging back to workers, right? So we know that in the restaurant industry, $20, $22 an hour is not uncommon, right? Frontline staff, retail service staff, it's driving up prices. Unionization, renegotiation. The fight for 15, I actually think, is going away because we have managed just organically to get our $15 an hour wages there, and in some cases even higher as local markets demand. As George Galloway said, nothing can happen for decades, and then decades happen in weeks. So if you are feeling whiplash, you're right where you should be, because it is a whiplash feeling. So let's come back to 3 horizons. The second horizon is, I call it the messy middle, right? Because it's the trapeze jump from going from managing the first horizon or being a visionary around the third horizon to having to be an entrepreneur, right? This is one of my favorite photographs. It's called The Catch. And you can see, that there's going to be some leaps of faith that are going to be required to get from Horizon 1 to Horizon 3. And we're going to have to think like entrepreneurs. So for those of you who are in business, you're perfectly positioned. You're perfectly positioned for this. And here are some questions to maybe ask yourself. How much time are you spending being strategic? We have a survey in the field right now, and we're finding 95% of our respondents are saying, I'm supposed to be strategic. And then we ask them how they spend their time, and they spend between 1.5 minutes and 4.5 minutes a day doing that work. That's not okay. Not now, right? So how can we be more thoughtful about the future? I think it's the perfect moment to come back to first principles. First principles. Right? So in your business, in your organization, what's the purpose? What's your purpose? Who are your actual customers? Nursing homes have recognized, yes, we have to take care of these patients in a certain way. There's all these rules and regulations about how we have to take care of our patients. But their secondary patients are people like you and me, who are loved ones of people in nursing homes. So as nursing homes, as schools, as restaurants, think about who their actual customers are, how they actually add value. The answers are surprising sometimes, right? There are things that are timelessly true about how you create value. If you're in financial services, there's going to be something about how you take care of your customers, right? What customers expect. There are timeless truths, but then there are things that are very timely that you have to figure out. One of which is what needs to die a graceful death. What is it time to let go of so that we can free up some resources and some personnel to work on things that are going to need to be true for the future, right? What new investments need to be made? Here's the most clarifying question I've ever been asked by a friend of mine when we were going through the Great Recession. He said, Rebecca, think of it this way. If somebody started a business today and were hell-bent on putting you out of business, what are the first 3 moves they'd make? And if you can get clear within your organization about the answer to that question, you'll get clear about what needs to end. You'll get clear about what needs to start, because you know in your bones how to be competitive in your market. So let me just wrap up real quickly. Here are some techniques to bring foresight to work, right? The first one, don't talk to the same people all the time. Don't watch the same news channels all the time. Change up your podcast. Change up who you're talking to. Talk to young people, right? This is the best way to get signals of the future. Signals are anything that make you cock your head to the side like a dog hearing a harmonica for the first time. Huh? Right? Next, weekly or bi-weekly. How can you talk with others in your organization about what they're noticing? This is another way to broaden your inputs of the kinds of things you're seeing and hearing. It's why coming to conferences like this is important. It's why going to your industry conferences are important. And it's why not staying in your industry is important, right? Thinking beyond your industry. Monthly or quarterly. What are the steer trends, society, technology, economy, environment, regulatory, that will impact you? Choose your time frame, the next 5 years through 2030. Right? There are ways to monitor and pay attention to the future. And then if you want to do something at the enterprise level, you could do what Disney does. They make foresight a competency for anybody coming into the C-suite, right? You could stand up, a point of view about the future by taking your own team through the 3 horizons questions. Finally, I strongly recommend that you do a little bit of foresight before you do strategic planning, right? So that you build a future-ready plan, not just a plan that honors what you've always done. So, let me take a couple questions. I think I felt a vibration, actual vibration, like a haptic on my phone, not like a good vibration. Okay, from the person whose cell phone ends in 7242, what changes would you like to see in the collective philosophy of the people of Dallas? What beliefs would push us forward and make us more resilient? Okay, so generally, two things. One is developing a high level of trust, right? So you have to be able to trust your partners to have your back, to do the right thing. So if you're in competition mode, like with other people, or oh my goodness, if Addison wins, McKinney loses, or whatever, right? That will get you so far, right? But it's not what we're seeing in regions that are actually winning. So first, trust. The second is the idea that making mistakes is okay. When you make the leap from Horizon 1 to Horizon 3, pilot projects are the name of the game. And it is as important to let a pilot project fail and have a nice death as it is to always want to be successful. So we're going to have to, once again, get friendly with trying some stuff. As one of my Zen teachers said, she always says, hey, can you just run the experiment? Just run the experiment. Okay, all right. I have 5 other messages, but I also know I need to get off this stage in just a moment. So the final thing, if you texted me, I promise I'll get you back this afternoon. Have you heard of the Overton window? The Overton window? During times of disruption, the window slides so that things that were once unthinkable are actually sensible. We are in a moment where things that were once unthinkable, remote work, never using dollar bills again, right? Completely having electronic payment systems, right? Rethinking what it means to have attainable housing, affordable housing. The window has shifted. And if you have a response that's like, sort of a sphincter tightening, like, I don't want the window to shift, right? I'm going to tell you what. Release. Because you've got people around you who are excited about this moment. And how do we build it together? Like they did in England after cholera, like they did in New York after the ice storm, like they did in Chicago after the fire. Innovation, collaboration, that is how you come out of a great disruption. Thank you.